We saw when we did queries how we were able to calculate information that didn't exist in the data. For example, the age and the profit. Now we can do that pretty similar calculation on a form. So we don't always have to do our calculations in queries and then base the form on a query. We can get the form to do some of the working out. So if we take our FRM customers, which simply presents us with a single form for each record. On here, if I wanted to do some working out, for example, I might want to work out just next to here how much profit we've made from this particular individual, then I would need to add a calculated field just as we added a calculated field to our queries. In order to do that, I go into Design. Now, a calculated field in a form is actually a new field. And to do that, we go to Form Design Tools, Design. This whole section here called Controls has all the Windows controls we could need. And a new field is the AB. Now, when you hover, it says text box, but it is actually a field. One click, come down into my form. I'm just going to click here just to demonstrate what happens. You get an unbound control, so a data control that is not actually getting its data from anywhere, and then a label to go with it. Well, the label we know we can rename, so I'm going to get in there, double click and call that profit. Now the unbound side needs to be closer to the label, so it's always the top left to move it independently of its label. If I'm on any other side, it moves it with the label, but I need it to move independently so that I can move the data control closer to the label, then move it together so that it's on the same line as total purchase YTD. Now you can see that when you're in design view as opposed to layout view and you get the grid, it is much easier to line things up. But if you don't trust your eye, you can select everything on that line there, go to Arrange, Align, Top, and then everything will be physically aligned to the topmost item. So for the difficult bit, I have my field. If I view that in Form View, I simply have an empty unbound field. In Design, what I then do is click in and then into there, so the word unbound disappears, and I put, pretty similar to the query, the calculation that I need. In this case, however, I do precede that calculation with an equal sign. So it's equals total purchase YTD. So that's the name of the field. If that field has spaces in, then I will need to put square brackets. If it doesn't, then I get away without them, but Access will put them in for me. And the profit is going to be times 0.22 because they make 22% profit. Return. No errors incurred, but you can see it's placed in the square brackets. Now, instead of widening this field to see what it's actually put in there, we can have the property sheet open, which it is over here, but it might not be, so I'm going to close it and then reopen the property sheet. Look on the Data tab, and we can see in here control source equals. Again, I can't quite see everything, but I can zoom in, which is Shift F2, same as the query. Because I haven't done Shift F2 in a form before, I'm hit with this security notice, but that's fine. And then I see the zoom, which I can change the font size for so I can read it better. So we're looking at total purchase YTD, which is a field. Access has spotted it's a field and put square brackets around it. Multiply by 0.22, so that's my 22% profit. Okay, view, and I see that the profit I incur, or gain really, on Nicole Nara is 2924.9836. This really needs formatting. Back in Design, I still have the field selected. On the property sheet, I then choose Format. In the Format drop box, I can choose then Currency, which I then see in Data View is correct, 2924.98. Move to the next one, 2924.74. 291924. So some very close sales here, showing me the profit that the company has earned. So that's a calculated field. And when you add a calculated field, what you'll find is people can still click in, but what they can't do is make a change. I get an error message down here. Control can't be edited. It's bound to the expression total purchase YTD times 0.22. Not very user friendly. What would be better is if they can't actually even click into the field. We do that by going back into design. We're on the same field. We're on the property sheet. We're in the data tab this time. We come down to enabled and locked. So enabled becomes no, which stops them being able to click into it. Locked changes to yes, which stops them from attempting to change it really. But because it's not enabled, they can't get in. View, and you'll see it's available on display, but they can't get in to do anything about it. Now you can enable it, but still leave it locked. So when you go back into there, they can now get in, but they can't make any changes. But what you've done by enabling it is allowed them to highlight and then copy and paste should they need to copy and paste that value. Personally, I'm not going to let them in. So enabled becomes no, locked is yes. They can't get in. The value is calculating every time I change the record, it recalculates for the next person. So this value here is not stored anywhere in any table. It's calculated every time the form changes to that record. The same as a query. A calculated field in a query calculates itself every time the query runs. So it's not stored anywhere. That's exactly the same case here. Obviously the difference is the way that you add that calculated field. This is a new field added using AB. Although it says text box, it is really a new field. Within that new text box, so I can place one on here, I lose the unbound simply by clicking in, and then I put equals followed by my syntax. So if I wanted to do one of the concatenation options that we did previously, I could say equals first name, ampersand, speech marks, space, speech marks. Remember, you need that gap in your ampersand. Otherwise, you won't have a gap between the first name and the last name. I don't actually need the label, so I can click and delete the label. So you can delete labels from data controls. I'm going to move this field actually up into the header, make it so much bigger. On the format, I'm going to get rid of the background color, not by changing it to the same color as the background, which is sort of one way of doing it, by actually going to the shape fill and choosing transparent. Make the font bold and much bigger, possibly too big. Let's change the color to red and then view that. So we now got the person's name that we're currently looking at in big and red at the top. However, we didn't lock the field, so it lets them in, but they can't make a change. We're just getting the error message at the bottom again. So that's not very user-friendly. So we go back into design, do the same as we did before. Enabled no, locked yes. The other thing I would probably do here is actually lose the border. So on the format, shape outline transparent. That way you just get the person's name across the top, and really you're not aware that it is calculating field. So each time I move from one record to the next, it calculates the first name and surname with a space between and displays it in the header. So it's much more obvious which customer you are looking at. So both that calculated field and that calculated field are locked and not enabled, so people cannot get in and even attempt to make the change, which they can't anyway because it's a calculation, but it stops the error message. So the calculated fields on a form have many uses, working every time you move to that record. They're not stored anywhere in the database.